As mentioned in my last video, I'm constantly learning new things about baseball history that I hadn't known before. The holes in the baseball timeline that exist inside my head are pretty big, and there are countless seasons of baseball that I still have yet to appreciate. I've been getting really excited for the upcoming season. I've been doing a lot of daydreaming about what kinds of crazy scenarios could go down this year, and that made me wonder what the most exciting season of Major League Baseball was. It seems like there are two common themes in the top of most rankings I've come across, and that's 1991 and 1998. One deemed the season that saved baseball, the other capped off with maybe the greatest World Series ever, and a ton of insane notable moments and players littered throughout them both. Today, you and I are going to learn about these two seasons, and then I'll ask you guys to decide which one of them you think is better. Or even if you think that there's a totally different season that's better. Before we read too much into this though, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, Audible. Audible is the world's leading provider of spoken word entertainment, providing its users with thousands of audiobooks and podcasts to be consumed easily at any time. You can start your own collection on Audible by going to audible.com/SRS or by texting SRS to 500 to get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day free trial. I've been reading the MVP Machine and it's actually really good. If you're interested in learning more about how Major League front offices are using data to build better baseball players, this is absolutely the book for you, and you can find it on Audible. I genuinely cannot recommend it enough, especially if you're interested in working in baseball one day. You can also find Moneyball, a classic, Keith Law's The Inside Game, and over 1,000 other baseball audiobooks on Audible to expand on your knowledge and love of the game. Not only does Audible have a huge collection of baseball audiobooks to listen to, but if you listen to every piece of content Audible has to offer, you'd be listening for more than 3 centuries. That's one whole Jamie Moyer's worth of time. I actually have trouble focusing in my day-to-day life, and especially when I read. I had already read a lot of the MVP Machine, but I decided to listen to the rest of it on Audible, and I actually retained a lot more of the information using this medium. You could download audiobooks offline and listen to them whenever and wherever you want. You can listen to them while shopping, at batting practice, even if you're at a game and your team's down 8 runs late. Again, you can start enjoying the near limitless amount of content Audible has to offer by going to audible.com/SRS or by texting SRS to 500. A big thank you again to Audible for sponsoring today's video. Between 1991 and 1998, I think the latter is the more well-known season of the two, and 1991 had a way better finish, so we're going to start today with 1998. The season that saved baseball is probably known most for McGwire and Sosa's race to break Roger Maris's 61 home run record. This was the height of the steroid era in Major League Baseball. A lot of fans today, especially on the younger side, seem to be okay with the trade-off between steroids and entertainment value at this time, accounting for where baseball may have headed without it. One thing's for certain though, everyone, whether they were a baseball fan or not, knew about Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa at this point. If you walked around your town in 2021 and asked people who Mike Trout was, I bet the proportion of people who actually did would be really small. I'm pretty anti-steroid by nature, but that interest in baseball in 1998 on a national level is really freaking cool. This home run race is probably the most well-known topic I'm going to touch on in this video. It's been talked about in detail every year since, and ESPN even released a documentary about it just a year ago. So instead of beating you to death with the details, I'm just going to re-emphasize that it was one of the most influential baseball events ever. McGwire and Sosa homered on the same date 18 times. Sosa hit 20 homers in June alone, the most ever in a month. This race lasted for months, and it did what Major League Baseball has been hoping would magically happen ever since, and that's to put baseball at the forefront of the nation's attention. But baseball was loaded with natural and unnatural talent far beyond the scope of just these two. Ken Griffey Jr. was in the prime of his career, coming off of his MVP 1997 and putting up pretty similar numbers in 98. He was selected to his 9th straight All-Star game, won his 9th straight Silver Slugger, and his 9th straight Gold Glove. This was the second to last season he'd be with the Mariners before heading off to Cincinnati at the turn of the century. Thankfully, the world didn't end, so we got to see another decade of Griffey play baseball. Now, some of you younglings might forget, but the Mariners had another superstar on the squad, and that was future Broadcasting Hall of Fame member Alex Rodriguez. It still wasn't quite the peak of his career, but fans still got to see one of the best in one of his best years. A-Rod made his own history too, joining fellow juicer Barry Bonds and fellow insane person Jose Canseco in the prestigious 40-40 Club. He was the 3rd player in baseball history ever to hit 40 homers and steal 40 bases in a single season. Speaking of Barry Bonds, he did this cool thing where he was intentionally walked with the bases loaded. That was pretty awesome. I think Josh Hamilton is the only other player who's ever been as flattered. By the way, I realized this after the fact, but this video has an insane amount of callbacks to past SRS videos, so I'm going to keep a tally from here on. 1998 saw the debut of the Arizona Diamondbacks and Tampa Bay Devil Rays, so Blake Snell has this year to thank for being pulled in the World Series last year. Cal Ripken's historic record of 2,632 consecutive games played ended this year too. We'll talk a little more about Cal when we get to 91. May 7th, 1998 was Beanie Baby Day at Yankee Stadium, and David Wells was the game's starting pitcher. Some little known facts about David Wells. He was 35 at this point. He finished third in the Cy Young that season. He was drunk on the mound that day. Wait, what? Yeah, David Wells called himself, quote, half drunk with bloodshot eyes, monster breath, and a skull-rattling hangover during that game. And, he threw a perfect game. Drunk David Wells threw a perfect game on Beanie Baby Day at Yankee Stadium. That is definitely up there on the leaderboards for most impressive performances while intoxicated. Up there with the best of the best, like Doc Ellis's 8-walk no-hitter while high on LSD, and Roger Clemens's no-hitter high on his own ego. And for our big-time SRS fans, 1998 was also the year of the greatest single-game pitching performance in Major League history. 20-year-old Cubs rookie Kerry Wood struck out 20 batters facing maybe the greatest Astros lineup ever constructed at that point. Now, I made an entire video on that game by itself a few months back, so if you want to hear more about it in the detail it deserves, add it to your watch later and check it out after this. 1991 was very backloaded. I think the best part of that season came in its final 7 games in October, and I promise it's definitely worth sticking around to find out why. Where 1998 differs most is that its World Series was really boring, especially for a season as historic as this one. On the one side, you had the best San Diego Padres club in team history. They won 98 games, they had 38-year-old Tony Gwynn, who was still good, they had Steve Finley, Cy Young snub Kevin Brown. This was a really good team. Their only problem is that they ran headfirst into a brick wall. And that was the greatest New York Yankees team ever constructed. There wasn't a single team in the history of the most successful franchise ever created that won more games than this club. They won 114, which is the third most ever in a single season, bested by only the 2001 Mariners and our old friends the 1906 Chicago Cubs. This was also the first year for 30-year-old GM Brian Cashman, who's still in that position today. So the Yankees played the Padres, and that's pretty much it. It was a 4-game sweep. Last year, ESPN ranked it the 17th worst World Series ever out of the 116 that have been played. One of the most exciting seasons ever ended with one of the worst World Series ever, and it was nothing if not a disappointment. So that was 1998. Just like the next year I'm going to talk about, I didn't cover every single insane player or moment, but I hopefully included just enough to give you a gauge on how exciting this season was. Now it's time to travel back 7 years and talk about 1991. 1991 may not have featured as many notable events as 1998, and it may not have been the year that saved baseball, but it does have maybe the greatest comeback story for 2 teams ever, and if you haven't heard anything about the World Series that year, just wait for it. As advertised, a lot of fun and crazy things happened this year too. First things first, 7 no-hitters. It's a lot for one season. Nolan Ryan threw one. It was the 7th of his career. Keep that in mind for later. Dennis Martinez threw one for the Expos. That was the last one the Expos would ever have as the Expos, and the catcher who caught him became the first catcher in Major League history to catch 2 perfect games. The most notable of the 3, I think, though, was thrown by Wilson Alvarez of the Chicago White Sox in his first career start. But the story gets even deeper. This actually wasn't his first career start. Bear with me for a second. Alvarez did actually start 1 game for the Texas Rangers 2 years earlier. First 5 batters he faced, a single, back-to-back homers, back-to-back walks, 3 runs scored, didn't get an out, didn't pitch in the majors for 2 seasons, had to sit at home with an ERA of infinity for 2 years, had his first start with the White Sox in 1991, threw a no-hitter, and that's baseball. 1991 also saw the birth of one of my favorite franchises, the Marlins. The 1991 Blue Jays were seeing the beginnings of a great career from SRS favorite John Olerud, and became the first Major League Baseball team to ever cross the 4 million fan mark in attendance. So go Canada. We've made videos on the MLB careers of Bo Jackson, Tim Tebow, and Michael Jordan, and this year the Braves signed Atlanta Falcons cornerback Deion Sanders, who would next year become the first player to play in a Super Bowl and a World Series. And just like Deion's hip that January, the all-time stolen base record was shattered this year. Lou Brock had it all to himself since 1977. It took him 19 years to steal his career 938 bases. It took Rickey Henderson about 14. Henderson's 1,406 career stolen bases still stands as the most in Major League history. Really thought Wilson Ramos had a shot, but I think his time's passed. Come on guys, these jokes are funny. 2 years before Henderson broke the record, Nolan Ryan struck him out for his 5,000th career strikeout. The day Henderson broke that stolen base record was the same day Ryan threw that 7th career no-hitter that I talked about earlier. They shared history again almost 2 years to the date. A bright spot for an otherwise bad year for the Baltimore Orioles, isn't that good tiring to say, was Cal Ripken Jr. Ripken accomplished something that had never been done before. He won the All-Star Game MVP, American League MVP, and Home Run Derby. Throw in a Silver Slugger and a Gold Glove, and he's basically Game of Thrones at the 2019 Emmys. Though Ripken had a 67 WRC plus in his last year and still had a better final season than Game of Thrones. Roger Clemens was baseball's best pitcher in 1991, Ken Griffey Jr. was getting closer to becoming the superstar we talked about earlier, Prince's father, Cecil Fielder, casually hit a baseball out of Milwaukee County Stadium, and Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonilla were crushing baseballs together in Pittsburgh. This is the only time you'll ever hear me say Bonilla's name calmly. As promised, let's get a little closer to the 1991 World Series. So, the 1991 World Series was amazing. And to find out what makes this World Series matchup so unbelievable, I need to show you the recent history for these two clubs. Up to this point in baseball history, there had never been a team to finish in last place in their division one year and make it to the World Series the following year. The 1990 Minnesota Twins finished 14 games under 500 at 74 and 88 and 29 games back in the standings. The 1990 Atlanta Braves finished 65 and 97, 26 games back of first place, with the worst record in Major League Baseball. The 1980s Twins weren't the 2010s Pirates, at least not often, but they were bad more often than they were good. They only finished over 500 3 times in the previous 13 years. The Braves, on the other hand, were... the Braves sucked. They were bad pretty much every year, and went from the worst team in baseball in 1990 to National League champions in 1991. So imagine the Pirates and Orioles making the World Series this year. That's kind of what this matchup was like. No team had ever done it before this point, and then there were two. Both teams had taken chances in free agency, the Twins signing Jack Morris, the Braves signing Terry Pendleton, one the 4th place finisher in the AL Cy Young vote, the other the National League MVP. The Twins were under 500 by Memorial Day, the Braves were at 500 on July 11th. Minnesota was 72 and 42 from June on, the Braves were 55 and 28 in the second half. Both steamrolled through the last few months of the season. It was legendary for the matchup alone, but this series had 5 one-run games, 3 extra inning games, and 4 games decided in the 9th inning or later. Game 2 was decided by a tie-breaking homer in the 8th by the Twins at home. Minnesota had a 2-0 lead heading back to Atlanta for games 3 through 5. Twins manager Tom Kelly then had to deal with something hopefully nobody has to deal with again very soon, and that's playing without the DH. By the 12th inning, Kelly had used all of his position players and had to send up a reliever to hit with the bases loaded and 2 outs. And we could all guess what happened there.
These guys just don't need to be hitting.
The Braves walked it off in the bottom half, and walked it off again with a triple in the 9th in Game 4. They took their 3rd straight in Game 5, and the Twins faced elimination back at the Metrodome. Kirby Puckett, a recently announced addition to MLB The Show 21, homered in the 11th inning to send the series to a historic Game 7. Game 7 had easily one of the greatest World Series pitching duels ever. 2 Hall of Famers at their best, Jack Morris for the Twins and John Smoltz for the Braves, who actually idolized Morris growing up, so another layer of coolness there. The two were trading zeros in Game 7 in a scoreless tie in the 8th. With a runner on first, NL MVP Terry Pendleton of the Braves hits a ball deep into the left center field gap, and a combination of bad base running from Lonnie Smith at first and some smart tactics from the Twins' middle infielders prevents Smith from scoring on that play. The Twins tight-roped out of a no-out jam with 2 runners in scoring position. Still scoreless in the 9th, Jack Morris finished the shutout by throwing a scoreless 9th himself, and when the game was forced into extras, he stayed in to pitch the 10th, and was perfect then too. Those 10 scoreless innings in Game 7 of the World Series was a key resume piece for Morris's relatively underwhelming Hall of Fame resume. In the bottom of the 10th, the Twins finished off a journey from last place in 1990 to world champions in 1991.
The Twins are going to win the World Series! The Twins have won it! It's a base hit! It's a 1-0 10-inning victory!
Minnesota's best player in 1990 by reference WAR had an on-base percentage of .254, but the Twins, the following year, won the World Series. This was a sort of last hurrah for Minnesota, as they didn't make the playoffs again until 2002, and they've only won 1 playoff series since. For Atlanta, though, this was the beginning of one of the most infamous dynasties in sports history. This was the first full season back for future Hall of Fame manager Bobby Cox, who'd lead the team for the next 20 years, and he'd lead this team to 3 of the next 5 World Series. The Braves of the 1990s and early 2000s went on one of the most well-known runs in sports history, and it all started with their historic World Series appearance in 1991. So those were just some of the many crazy things that happened in 1991 and 1998, two of arguably the most exciting seasons of Major League Baseball ever played. If there's one that you think was better than the other, let me know in the comments and make sure to tell me why. As the 2021 season begins, after a weird and definitely hectic 2020, I thought it would be fun to take a look back at a couple of baseball's best seasons, just as a reminder of the potential a full 162-game season can offer. There were also callbacks to a ton of our past videos, so being this is my first one since the season started, I'm really happy that I got to look back on a lot of our past stuff before we move on to a new season of content. Thanks so much for watching if you made it this far. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to keep up with our videos throughout the 2021 MLB season and beyond, and I'll see you next time.